Welcome to the first episode of Codename Sailor Versus, a series where I am going to be looking at the original Sailor Moon manga and then comparing it chapter by chapter to the Sailor Moon Crystal anime, as well as the original anime adaptation of Sailor Moon, or at least the closest comparison that series has to those manga chapters. And at the end of each of these videos, I'm going to judge all of them and see which one I think is the best of the three. This first episode is actually pretty easy to summarize because Sailor Moon Crystal and Sailor Moon Original, or I'm just going to refer to as classic for the sake of simplicity, both adhere very closely to the manga for this. So I'm just going to summarize all of the plot points that they have in common, and then at the end I'll go over where the two anime adaptations differ and things that were in the manga and may not have been in the anime. Our story begins with Usagi Tsukino oversleeping and blaming her mom as she darts out the door to go to school. On her way there, she comes across a black cat with a bandage on her forehead. She removes the bandage to reveal a weird kind of crescent-shaped bald spot on its forehead. This interaction actually does make her late for school. When she gets to school, she is then in trouble, so she has to now stand in the hall. While she's standing out there, she gets hungry and decides to just pick at her lunch early, to which she gets in trouble for. Her teacher reprimands her and then goes off on her about her terrible test scores. Next, we're introduced to Naru, who is Usagi's best friend, and Umino, an obnoxious nerd that's in her class and just kind of hangs around them. Eventually they start talking about a string of robberies that's been hitting their city, as well as Sailor V, a mysterious heroine who's been stopping these crimes, to which Usagi somehow has zero knowledge of. Naru then tells everyone about how her mother runs a jewelry store that's having a huge sale, so they decide to go there after school. When they get there, Naru's mom is like, "Hey, having this big sale, I'll even give an extra discount since you're Naru's friends," and Naru's just like, "This is really out of character for my mom. She doesn't really do sales. I wonder what's going on." As much as Usagi would love to get a piece of jewelry from there, she knows that because of her piss poor test scores, she is definitely not gonna be able to talk her parents into buying her anything. So she walks out, gets pissed off, crumples her test, chucks it behind her, and then hits some random dude in the face. He makes fun of her hair buns and her test score. She gets flustered and angry and storms off. Also, Naru's mom's acting a little weird. There might be something going on with her. She talks about needing energy. After that, Usagi goes to the arcade and finds out that there is a Sailor V game that's coming out. And also, the strange black cat from earlier seems to have followed her. When Usagi gets home, her mother goes off on her about her terrible test scores and boots her out of the house. Her little brother makes fun of her for getting kicked out of the house, to which she tries to plant a firm Sailor V kick at him, only to just kick the door, and then she just cries and whines and complains and wants to come back inside. Back at the jewelry store, Naru's mom is collecting energy, and Naru sees her doing this, and it turns out, oh f***, that's not actually Naru's mother, it's some monster that just looks like her and is stealing the energy from people that she stole jewelry from. Back at Usagi's house, she's now inside, taking a nap, when the mysterious black cat wakes her up. The black cat, turns out, can talk, tells her name is Luna, and that she has been chosen to be a Sailor Scout. Yes, I'm going to call them Scouts. Sue me. I just can't not. That she has been chosen to be a Sailor Scout, specifically the Warrior of Justice and Love and blah blah blah, Sailor Moon. She then gives Usagi a brooch, tells her to say Moon Prism Power Makeup, and Usagi does so and transforms into Sailor Moon. Immediately after transforming, she is alerted that Naru is in trouble, and she goes to save her. Usagi arrives just in time as the monster is about to kill Naru. She announces herself as the Warrior of Love and Justice. The monster has no clue who the hell she is, and then all the women that had had their energies drained by her jewelry then rise up as mind-controlled warriors to attack Sailor Moon. Usagi's completely fucking incompetent and falls and tumbles and freaks out and cries and creates this giant sonic shockwave. And then a mysterious masked figure tells her to take this opportunity to attack. Luna tells her to throw her tiara, which she does. It kills the monster. She saves the day. Usagi sees the mysterious masked figure known as Tuxedo Mask as he is leaving the scene, and she swoons over him. And the episode comes to a close with Naru talking about this wild shit that happened the night prior, and Usagi overhearing it. End of episode. Now, for the most part, as you can tell, a lot of the same beats get hit here, but there are still plenty of differences, especially in the classic version. So I'm just gonna run through in order just where these two anime adaptations differ and the tonal shifts that they take, because it's very apparent just how different these two adaptations are just from the first few seconds of the show. The first adaptational change actually comes from Crystal. It starts off with this dreamy, ethereal music. We see space, we see planets, we see a kingdom, we see a princess. She's running, and then she's, as a silhouette, runs into the arms of a prince who she's about to kiss right before Sailor Moon wakes up, freaking the fuck out that she has overslept. And even though Crystal and Classic both have Usagi oversleeping and panicking and running up the door and blaming her mom, it still has those two scenes, but they're adapted in very, very different ways that give you a very good idea of just the huge tonal shifts that these adaptations are going for. Crystal is clearly trying to be a bit more grounded. It's not being too over the top with its animation. It's trying to present things in a slightly more realistic fashion, as realistic as you can get with this premise at very least. And the tone and the atmosphere is this kind of dreamier, more romanticized aesthetic, where Sailor Moon Classic is more about high energy, comedy, sillier faces, getting all chibi and super deformed, and like Usagi is just bolting out the door and like, you know, making all these exaggerated expressions and being extra panicky. Where Usagi and Crystal, she does panic a little, but it's really more of just like her bitching at her mom for letting her oversleep while she's just kind of rushingly getting dressed, and then she kind of tumbles down the stairs, but she just kind of tumbles ass first in a very realistic fashion. It's not played up in any dramatic way. And the thing is though, that both of these adaptational takes are perfectly valid because they're both in the manga. The manga is kind of the middle point between these two styles. The manga goes into the super deformed chibi aesthetics and kind of crazier facial expressions and all the goofy humor, but also will get very kind of dreamy and romantic and very shoujo-y in its aesthetic and its atmosphere. So basically these two adaptations just kind of split the difference on what the manga actually is. Something that is missing from Classic is her mother referencing Sailor V. In the manga and in Crystal, she is reading a newspaper and talks about how, oh, I wish my daughter could be more like Sailor V, as she's reading an article about Sailor V. This doesn't show up in Classic. In fact, Sailor V isn't mentioned until the conversation with Naru and Umino in the schoolyard. Both in the manga and in Crystal, as Usagi is bolting on her way to school, she actually steps on Luna, something she doesn't do in Classic. In Classic, she actually sees some kids bullying Luna, and she stops them and then rescues her. Luna does reference that she was bullied by kids, like in the manga and in Crystal. It's how she got the band-aid on her forehead, but here Usagi actually sees it and intervenes. Both Crystal and Classic introduce our villains a little early. In Crystal, we get to see Jadeite summoning Morga, the monster version of Naru's mother, and in Sailor Moon Classic, we get to see Queen Beryl, who's the head honcho of our villain force, talking about how they need energy to revive their great leader, and then summons Jadeite to go complete that task for her. In Crystal, when Usagi is sitting in the hall, before she starts eating her lunch, she recalls the dream that she had about the princess, talking about how she wishes she was a princess. Yeah, they're gonna keep referencing this dream. I feel like it's gonna end up being a motif throughout the entire series, just based on how this one episode keeps recalling it. When Usagi is leaving the jewelry store and bumps into the mysterious guy, his name is Mamoru. He's not given a name in that first chapter or in the first episode of either anime, but his name is Mamoru. He's wearing a tux in the manga and in Crystal, and Usagi even notes how that's f***ing weird. Why is he wearing a tux? In classic, Mamoru is actually just wearing regular street clothes, and Usagi still feels the need to point out how he's weird. Something worth noting though is, even though he's not wearing a tux in this episode, in a later filler episode of Classic, he does wear a tux, but Usagi doesn't note that it's weird, he's just wearing a tux. In Crystal, whenever Usagi first sees Mamoru, they kind of share like this long, romanticized look at one another, and they get a little awkward, and then Usagi panics and like grabs her bag and runs off, and it's talking about like, oh, why is my heart pounding so much, ooh. In the manga and in Classic, she's just kind of frustrated, thinks he's a dickhead, and walks off. Once again, Crystal is really trying to like lean into the more romanticized elements, and they're really trying to lean into the connections between the princess and the prince, and it's making it very, very clear like who these people are and their connections that they're gonna have at some point. After Usagi storms off in the manga and in Crystal, Mamoru looks at the jewelry store and goes, oh, this is the biggest jewelry store in town. It might even have the silver crystal I'm looking for. In Classic, he doesn't have that line of dialogue. He looks at the jewelry store, but doesn't say anything about a silver crystal. He's just kind of silent and contemplative. In the manga and in Crystal, when she goes to the arcade, Usagi actually goes inside the arcade, plays the Sailor V game, and gets some pro gamer strats from Motoki, this good-looking guy that she has a crush on who works at the arcade. At the end of that arcade scene, Luna actually approaches Usagi and she kind of like stares her down weirdly, and Motoki notes how like, yeah, no, she's just kind of been hanging around here lately. In Classic, Luna is actually just kind of following Usagi and watching her from afar. Also, she has like a line of dialogue where you learn, oh, this cat can talk. That's weird. When Naru's fake monster mom is draining energy from the people that she sold jewelry to, in Classic, the people are still in the jewelry store and Naru's seeing this happen. In the manga and in Crystal, this is like after the store is already closed and she's like pooling all of this energy into like a weird canister, and Naru walks in and catches her. In Classic, when Usagi goes to take her nap, she just naps for a moment. In the manga and in Crystal, she actually has a dream that we get to see. It's her playing the Sailor V game and rescuing Luna at the end of it. But in Crystal, they tack on more of the princess dream in the very beginning. In fact, you even know it's like, oh, it's a princess dream. It's this dream again. Oh, neat. Oh, wait, no, it's a Sailor V dream. I'm playing the Sailor V arcade game. It's a weird kind of juxtaposition. It doesn't really flow well at all. Now I'm going to have to like kind of get into aesthetics and character designs for a moment, though each one kind of has its own style, specifically with Sailor Moon's outfit. When she transforms in the manga, her design is cluttered as fuck. She's got this big brooch in the center of her bow. She has what looks like a smaller version of that brooch dangling from her choker, and then she's got this big white mask and the yellow tiara and these white hair barrettes and these jewels in her hair and these big earrings, and it's too much. It is too much going on here. Crystal kind of alleviates this a bit by getting rid of the mask, something that the manga does too, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I personally like the classic version the most, and who knows, maybe this is a bit of nostalgia, but I feel like it strips down a lot of the more cluttered elements of Usagi's, or specifically Sailor Moon's, design. The brooch is a bit more simplified, there isn't as many extra jewels kind of hanging around it. There isn't a second smaller brooch hanging from her choker. Instead, she's just kind of got like a little crescent moon on the choker itself instead of dangling from it. Her earrings are smaller. The mask isn't there at all, kind of just like in Crystal. And the hair barrettes are gone. Like, honestly, if there was one thing I would keep from the other design is the hair barrettes. I think they look really good, and I do know other versions of the classic Sailor Moon design, like when she gets power-ups, will have barrettes. But I think it's a really good aesthetic look, and it's kind of a shame that they didn't keep that for this iteration of Sailor Moon. So yeah, I brought up all of that to point out the mask specifically, because like I said, Crystal doesn't have a mask, Classic doesn't have a mask. The manga does, sort of. She transforms with the mask, and I have to assume that the mangaka, Naoko Takeuchi, must have known it was an aesthetically bad look, because Usagi immediately throws that bitch off. Because inside the mask, she can see Naru being attacked, and that's how she knows Naru's in trouble. Crystal, as well as in Classic, instead, she just hears Naru's cries coming from the jewels in her hair buns that are blinking at her. And I find this really interesting because, like, the Crystal anime deviates tonally so much. Like, it's a very different adaptation from the Classic series. So for it to ditch an element from the manga and instead pull an element from Classic is a really cool choice. Like, just kind of like, oh, like they have seen the original series, they have seen that old adaptation, they're just mostly ignoring it for the sake of their adaptation because they want it to be their own thing. And I respect that. Okay, so something that is kind of worth noting is Tuxedo Mask in the manga and in Crystal, he just seems to be a thief. Like, he's this phantom thief. He's in Sailor Moon Classic, like, he comes in, he throws down the rose, and it's really cool, and like, he gives like an inspiring speech that motivates Sailor Moon, and usually also causes a distraction for the monster, so that way Sailor Moon can get the attack in. But in Crystal and the manga, he just kind of like stays in the shadows. He kind of just talks from a distance, and Usagi doesn't even actually see him until after everything's said and done. Like, that f***ing meme of like, my job here is done. It's like, you didn't do anything. Honestly, that meme should be reserved for the Crystal and manga version of Tuxedo Mask, because he literally does nothing. At very least, Tuxedo Mask in Classic, you know, he does the rose thing, and he gives like the inspiring speech, and he does cause a distraction. Here, he is staying far the f*** away from the action. As far as Crystal in the manga is concerned, at least. And now we get to the ending where everyone's at school and Naru's talking about what happened the night prior. In Classic, she says that she had like this wild dream where like this person named Sailor Moon saved her from a monster version of her mom. And like her friends are like, what? I had that same dream. And Usagi's like, yo, can you shut the f*** up? I'm tired. I'm trying to sleep. But in the manga and Crystal, Naru knows that this is a thing that actually happened, and Usagi's just like, oh shit, that wasn't a dream. I thought this was, oh, I'm really a Sailor Scout. Fuck. And then Crystal adds in a little extra scene of foreshadowing, showing a mysterious girl with blue hair. It's Ami Mizuno. I'm going to assume you guys know a little bit about Sailor Moon. It's Sailor Goddamn Mercury. So yeah, that covers my summary and like how the two adaptations differ from the source material, how they differ from one another. So which one do I think is the best? Honestly, it's kind of hard to say because they are so similar and they all are kind of just doing their own thing. So like, they're all kind of, in my opinion, equally good. Like, you can't go wrong with either one as far as your introduction to Sailor Moon. That being said, this is Codename Sailor Versus, not Codename Can't We All Just Get Along, or Codename Everybody Is Valid. This is Versus. We need to pick a goddamn winner. So, oh god, I'm gonna sound like such a nostalgia bitch, but Classic, I gotta go with Classic. Let me explain. Mostly it just kind of comes down to the little details. I mean, just from a personal preference stance, I like the more fun, high energy humor of classic. It's something that does also show up in the manga, but Crystal just doesn't lean into it as much. And like I said, Crystal is going for its own thing, and it's a completely valid interpretation of that material, but I just don't find it as engaging or as fun as what we get in classic. But it's not just limited to the adaptational stuff, because that also doesn't factor in the manga. So with the manga in Crystal, there are certain things in the plot that I just kind of don't care for. I feel like it really leans too much into the slice of life elements. It doesn't really give us too much breathing room there. It feels like we're always moving from one thing to the next. Like every couple of pages, we're moving to meeting some new characters in a new setting with some new situation, all in the day in the life of Usagi Tsukino. And then like at the end, it's a magical girl show and she has superpowers now. Because with Crystal and the manga, we get the introduction to Usagi, and then we get Luna, and then we get the teacher, and then we get Naru and Umino, and then we have to hear about Sailor V, and then we have to go to the jewelry store to set up the actual villain plot of this story, which, by the way, at this point, like in the manga, this is the first time there's any kind of antagonistic force being displayed, and it's kind of very subtly done. Like, you know, she's shady, but you don't have a clear idea of what's going on. At very least in Crystal, you have the introduction of Jadeite earlier in the episode, creating Morga, who's clearly, Naruto's mother, or a monster version of Naruto's mother. In Classic, we just straight up get Beryl, a villain who, like the leader, who will not be introduced until later on. Then we get Jadeite, we have their whole villain plan. It establishes threats that the manga doesn't, at very least, so that's something that I have to, give the anime adaptations a point for. But then with the manga and Crystal, you just also have to, go to the arcade, and you have to meet Matoki, and we also have to have the scene with Mamoru. And, okay, the scene with Mamoru, I think the tuxedo thing is so goddamn stupid. Why is he wearing a tux? She thinks it's weird. She notes that it's weird. And he's wearing the exact same goddamn tux that he wears as Tuxedo Mask. All the little accoutrements that go with, he's wearing the same fucking outfit. The only difference is that he swapped out his little fucking shades for a damn ballroom mask and a top hat and a cape. That is it. That is all he has changed. It's not any version of Sailor Moon goes to any lengths to keep Tuxedo Mask's identity a secret. You're pretty much supposed to know Mamoru is Tuxedo Mask, but it's so blatantly obvious in the manga and in the Crystal adaptation for Usagi specifically that because Mamoru even says in those two versions that he's looking for the silver crystal, and then Tuxedo Mask is looking for the silver crystal, so it's definitely not trying to hide it. But for Usagi's sake, not for the audience's sake, but for Usagi's sake, it's just it just makes her look even dumber than she actually is. I understand she's supposed to be a ditz, but she shouldn't be a fucking moron. And that is something that has always frustrated me, that he's just decked out in a fucking tux. I mean, yeah, Mamoru wears a tux, I said, in a random episode of Classic, but at very least, it's not the same fucking tux he wears as Tuxedo Mask. So, you can kind of just be like, oh, that's a weird coincidence. This guy, who kind of looks like Tuxedo Mask, is wearing a tux. But it's not the same tux, so it's okay. Sort of. Or you just don't notice it, because Usagi doesn't seem to make any note of it. I'm sorry, but that has always frustrated me, both with Crystal and the manga, because it just makes Usagi seem incredibly dumb. So between, just the bloated storytelling of the manga and Crystal, where it's just trying to cram all of these things in there, honestly, I really think adding in the stuff with Beryl and Jadeite is more beneficial to the story and the tone and the pacing than having Motoki at the fucking arcade. Because, like, they saved that scene. That scene does show up in Classic, but they save it for episode 2. Like, I mean, they literally could have just saved, like, the introduction of Motoki and the whole arcade stuff in the Sailor V game. Like, you could have saved that for chapter 2 of the manga, because they go to the arcade in chapter 2. I'll be talking about that at some point. So it's just kind of wasted space here that could have been used for anything else. Also, okay, like, the dream sequence, like, I think Crystal leans into the whole dream thing a little too much. Recalling it 2 different times in the episode, like having the initial dream and then referencing it 2 separate times, especially the second time they recall it, is really weird because, like I said, it's like the princess dream and then it goes into the Sailor V dream, and it doesn't flow well at all. But they very clearly want you to know this dream is important. Thank you, anime. I got it. Like, honestly, like, I'm getting, like, really heated, but on it, like, it's not bad. It's just, like, these little frustrating things where I'm like, why is it like that? And I just look at the Classic series and I go, yeah, no, that was for the better. That was just for the better. I am sorry. Like, maybe it is nostalgia bias or something, but I just think the adaptational changes that it made, I think, just work better overall. Also, a bit of criticism I want to throw at the manga is, like, I find it kind of suffers with readability. Takeuchi, like, her way she lays out her panels, her excessive use of screen tones and kind of shoujo bubbles, and like, it makes it kind of hard to follow or to see, like, one transition to the next, or like, there's so many little details I actually missed in the manga where I was just like, oh, Crystal did this thing, and I go, that wasn't in the manga, and then I went back to the manga and went, oops, no, I'm dumb, I missed it, it was right there. Specifically, something that stands out to me is in Crystal and the manga, when Sailor Moon introduces herself, she hasn't been given a name yet. She's like, I need to have, like, a superhero name, and then Luna meows at the moon, and she goes, that's it, and then she goes, I'm Sailor Moon. So she kind of, you know, Luna points her in the direction of what her name should be, but she still also kind of guesses it and comes up with it. I didn't think that was a thing in the manga because of how it's presented in the manga. Like, the paneling is just, it's all a little cluttered, and I just completely skimmed right on past it. Also, I said in Crystal, Usagi gets, like, flustered and woo-woo over Mamoru, and that doesn't happen in the manga. Okay, asterisk to that, I don't know if it doesn't happen in the manga. Like, she doesn't audibly say anything or think anything about it, but, like, she does have, like, this kind of shoujo-y background, and she's blushing as she's looking back at him. But I don't know if that's actually her being flustered, or if it's just her being embarrassed because of her test score and being agitated. Because, like, yeah, she has the dreamy shoujo bubble bullshit going on, but she also had that when she met Luna. I don't think she wants to f*** a cat. It's not one of those manga. At least I'm pretty sure Usagi doesn't want to f*** a cat. I mean, I'm sure there's probably like a doujinshi or 2 out there. Or, you know what? F*** it. Let's not go there. But yeah, like, that's kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to, like, the readability of the manga. There's just certain things where I'm like, it's really nice to look at. I like the humor. I like the characters. I like the aesthetic a lot. I like all the shoujo-y bubbly shit, but sometimes it just goes overboard and it's just a little too dreamy, and it makes it hard for me to parse out what's actually happening. Like, when I have to, like, read the manga and then I watch Crystal, and then the manga, I pick up on things in the manga because the anime just kind of plainly puts it out there and it's just kind of hidden in the paneling of the manga, or just the manga is just kind of paced awkwardly and I just couldn't parse that out. It's a problem with the manga. Something else worth noting as far as, like, a point for Classic is the monster design. Morga, the fake evil Naru monster mom, is goddamn nightmare fuel in Classic. Like, she looks pretty f***ing goofy in Crystal, in my opinion. like in the manga, she's like, you know, sketchy and really monstrous looking, and you know, like it's a good creature design, I guess. And that does not translate at all in Crystal. Like Crystal hews closer to the actual design, but it just looks dumb and not monstrous at all. Where in Classic, it's fucking nightmare fuel, and she turns her goddamn head all the way around, and it's fucking creepy. Like, I will say, I will give the manga a point, because when Usagi throws her tiara, it actually slits, like, her fucking throat and, like, takes the majority of her head off before she turns to sand. A very Cutie Honey-esque fatality that I very much appreciated in the manga that neither adaptation actually delivered on. So yeah, that's the first episode of Codename Sailor Versus. Like I said, all three are really good. Yeah, I got heated and I thought like the whole tuxedo thing is really dumb and it makes our protagonist look dumb for not figuring it out. But all three of these adaptations or versions are good. Like, they are all worth checking out. I could easily recommend any of these to anyone. Like I said, what really kind of just tips over Classic, in my opinion, like, is just the manga's readability, stuff holding it back, the Mamoru tuxedo stuff, thinking it's dumb, the monster designs in Classic, and just the overall more fun, energetic aesthetic, and just kind of like taking out the arcade scene, like I said, I think benefits the pacing, and like putting in the stuff with Beryl and Jadeite at the beginning, like establishes our villains and establishes a thread and gives us something to break up all the slice of life stuff that's happening in that episode. So yeah, that wraps up this episode. Till next time, guys, Xeon out. Alright, 2 videos in. I think I can officially say I'm back. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. It's going to be a very long-running series, and I got really, like, hyped to work on this one, because, like, as I've said before, I'm a huge fan of Sailor Moon, and, yeah, like, I'm looking forward to doing more of this. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, you know the jazz. Like, share it with other Moonies if you know any. I got some Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. If you want to watch that, that's already out. I got some JoJo's content coming next week, and until next time, guys, Xeon out. Does it really work if I say the Xeon out thing? Because like I already said it in the actual video, but now I'm saying it here. Is this weird? I don't know. I'm weird.